If the Brain Was an App podcast episode for Prediction Before Perception. Hello, and welcome to If the Brain Was an App, the expanded interface of this place called Earth series exploring perception, programming, and the hidden architecture of the human mind. In the last episode, we explored how the world you see is not simply the world as it is, but the world as your brain constructs it. The prediction problem, we looked at how perception is filtered, shaped, edited, framed, and influenced before it becomes the version of reality you experience. In this episode, we go deeper, because the brain does not just construct reality after it arrives. It prepares reality before it arrives. It predicts. It anticipates. It reaches ahead of the moment using memory, pattern, expectation, fear, desire, experience, and bodily state to form a model of what is probably about to happen. And very often, you do not react to what is happening. You react to what your brain expects is about to happen. That is the prediction problem. You do not meet the present moment as cleanly as you may imagine. You meet it through an interface already shaped by what your brain expects the present moment to mean. Before someone has finished a sentence, your brain may already be preparing the response. Before a room has revealed its atmosphere, your nervous system may already be scanning for safety or danger. Before a conversation has unfolded, your body may already be bracing for criticism, rejection, misunderstanding, conflict, or disappointment. Before an event has happened, your mind may already be living in the emotional reality of what it expects. This is not because the brain is broken. It is because the brain is adaptive. It cannot wait for every detail to arrive in full before beginning to organize the experience. If it did, life would be far too slow. The brain is constantly trying to get ahead of the world. It predicts what is likely, prepares the body, guides attention, and then compares incoming information against the model it has already formed. If the model fits well enough, perception feels smooth. If the model fails, the brain updates, resists, or sometimes tries to force the new information into the old frame. This means that perception is not simply input followed by interpretation. It is a prediction meeting input, expectation meeting signal, past learning meeting presents reality. The brain is not just asking, what is this? It is already asking, what is this likely to be? And that difference is enormous. You can see this in ordinary life. Someone sends a short message, we need to talk. Those 4 words may be neutral in one context, but the brain rarely treats them as neutral. It predicts. If your system associates those words with conflict, rejection, punishment, or emotional pressure, the body may tighten before you know anything else. The heart rate shifts. The mind starts searching. What did I do? What have they found out? Are they angry? Is this bad? In that moment, you are not yet responding to the conversation. The conversation has not happened. You are responding to a predicted future, or imagine walking into a room where you expect judgment. The faces may be ordinary. The silence may be incidental. The atmosphere may be unclear. But if the brain has predicted rejection, it begins to search for signs of rejection. A neutral glance becomes evidence. A pause becomes tension. A quiet tone becomes disapproval. The brain is not simply recording the room. It is testing the room against the expectation already active in the system. This is how expectation loops begin. What the brain expects shapes what it notices. What it notices appears to confirm what it expected. That confirmation strengthens the expectation. And the stronger the expectation becomes, the more perception begins to organize around it. The person who expects betrayal sees hints of betrayal. The person who expects disrespect hears disrespect quickly. The person who expects danger finds danger cues everywhere. The person who expects failure may interpret difficulty as proof that they were always going to fail. The person who expects the world to be hostile may begin to experience hostility, even where ambiguity would have allowed another reading. That does not mean their perceptions are invented from nothing. There may be real signals present, but prediction determines which signals are amplified, which are ignored, and what the brain makes those signals mean. This is why fear is so powerful. Fear is often a prediction before reality. It is the body preparing for what might happen as though it is already happening. That can be useful when the danger is real and immediate. But when fear becomes chronic, conditioned, or socially engineered, the brain can begin to live ahead of itself, continually scanning the future for what may go wrong. The person may call it caution, intuition, realism, or discernment. Sometimes it may be, but sometimes it is anticipation wearing the mask of truth. A nervous system shaped by repeated stress can begin to predict threat as a default. Not because every situation is dangerous, but because prediction has learned to protect the organism by preparing for danger early. The problem is that early preparation changes perception. If the body is already braced, the world looks different. If the breath is already shallow, the room feels different. If the muscles are already tense, ambiguity feels less tolerable. If the brain is already expecting an attack, even a question may sound like an accusation. This is where people often defend beliefs before thinking. A belief is not just an idea sitting quietly in the mind. A belief can become a predictive filter. It tells the brain what kind of world to expect. If someone believes people cannot be trusted, the brain does not neutrally observe others and then decide. It predicts untrustworthiness and searches for confirmation. If someone believes they are always misunderstood, the brain listens for misunderstanding before the conversation has fully happened. If someone believes one group is always lying, every statement from that group is interpreted through suspicion before evidence is examined. If someone believes they are awake and others are asleep, disagreement may be perceived as proof of blindness rather than an opportunity for reflection. By the time conscious thought begins, the perception already supports the belief. This is why changing beliefs can be so difficult. We are not only asking someone to change an idea, we are asking the brain to change the predictions that help organize reality. That can feel destabilizing. If a belief has become a map, then questioning the belief feels like losing orientation. If a belief has become identity, then contradiction feels like a threat. If a belief has become a belonging, then doubt feels like exile. The brain may defend the prediction not because it is accurate, but because it has become structurally useful. This connects directly to the work we have already explored across this series and the wider field of this place called Earth. Human beings are not simply persuaded by facts floating in isolation. They are shaped by patterns, states, language, repetition, belonging, and the nervous system's need to anticipate what is coming. If you can influence what a person expects, you can influence what they perceive. If you can influence what they fear, you can influence what they prepare for. If you can influence what they prepare for, you can influence how they behave before reality has fully arrived. That is why prediction before perception is not only a neuroscience idea. It is a social, emotional, relational, political, technological, and spiritual issue. It affects how people argue, love, defend, obey, distrust, hope, conform, ribble, and interpret the future. It affects how the media works. It affects how trauma works. It affects how propaganda works. It affects how relationships break down before a conversation has even begun. It affects how the body lives inside imagined futures that may never arrive. The unsettling question is this: how much of your present life is being shaped by what your brain is predicting before the present has had a chance to reveal itself? How many conversations have you entered already prepared to be hurt? How many opportunities have you dismissed because your brain predicted failure? How many people have you misread because they resembled an old pattern? How many arguments have escalated because your body reacted to what you thought was coming, not what was actually said? How many times has fear arrived first, built the frame, and then called itself perception? Again, this is not about blaming the brain. The predictive brain is extraordinary. It allows you to move through the world with speed and continuity. It helps you catch a falling object before you have consciously calculated its movement. It helps you understand speech before every word is complete. It helps you recognize familiar places, anticipate social rhythm, prepare for danger, and make sense of incomplete information. Without prediction, life would be chaotic. But prediction becomes a problem when it becomes unconscious, rigid, fear-based, identity-bound, or manipulated. A flexible prediction can be updated. A rigid prediction defends itself. A regulated nervous system can be surprised. A threatened nervous system often treats surprise as danger. A conscious mind can ask, is this happening or am I expecting it? An unconscious pattern simply says, this is what always happens. That question may be one of the most useful questions in this entire episode. Is this happening or am I expecting it? Not because expectation is always wrong. Sometimes expectation is based on real pattern recognition. Sometimes the body remembers what the conscious mind wants to ignore. Sometimes anticipation protects us from repeating harm. But sometimes expectation becomes a prison. It takes old data and projects it onto new moments. It collapses possibility into repetition. It makes the future feel already decided before life has had room to unfold. So, as we enter this episode, the invitation is not to stop predicting. You cannot. The brain will keep predicting because prediction is part of how it functions. The invitation is to become more conscious of prediction, to notice when expectation arrives before perception, to notice when fear is preparing the body for a reality that is not yet here, to notice when belief is organizing evidence before the evidence has been fully met, to notice when the nervous system is living in a predicted future rather than the actual present, because you do not see the world only as it is. You see what your brain expects it to be, and the more unconscious that expectation remains, the more the future you fear, desire, defend, or repeat may quietly shape the world you think you are simply observing. Part 2, Anchor Concept. The predictive brain. The core idea in this part of the episode is that the brain is not merely reactive. It is predictive. It does not sit back, wait for the world to arrive in full, and then calmly decide what everything means. It is already working ahead of the moment. It is anticipating incoming information, preparing the body, forming expectations, filling gaps, and trying to reduce uncertainty before the full picture is available. This is one of the reasons reality feels so immediate. The brain is not building experience from scratch every second. It is using what it has already learned to predict what is most likely happening now. Your brain doesn't wait for reality. It tries to get there first. That line matters because it challenges the ordinary assumption that perception begins with the outside world. We often imagine the process like this. Something happens, the senses receive it, the brain interprets it, and then we respond. But the predictive brain reverses part of that sequence. The brain is already generating expectations before the sensory data is complete. Incoming information is then compared against the prediction. If the information fits well enough, the model continues. If it does not fit, the brain has to correct, update, ignore, resist, or explain away the mismatch. So, perception is not simply input followed by interpretation. It is a prediction meeting based on sensory input. It is an expectation being confirmed, challenged, or corrected. In simple terms, the loop looks like this: prediction, sensory input, correction, updated model. The brain predicts what is likely to be there. The senses provide incoming information. The brain compares the two. If there is a mismatch, it may update the model. If the mismatch is small, it may barely register. If the mismatch threatens identity, belief, safety, or emotional stability, the brain may resist the update. That resistance is where things become psychologically and socially important, because the brain is not just predicting the physical world. It is predicting people. It is predicting tone. It is predicting danger. It is predicting belonging. It is predicting rejection. It is predicting meaning. It is predicting what a situation is likely to become before it has fully become anything. You can see this in ordinary conversation. Someone begins a sentence, and before they finish, you already know where you think they are going. Sometimes you are right, sometimes you are wrong, but your brain is not waiting passively for the final word. It is predicting based on tone, rhythm, previous conversations, relationship history, emotional atmosphere, and the sentence structure itself. That is why we finish people's sentences. It is why we interrupt. It is why we sometimes respond to what we thought someone was about to say, instead of what they actually said. This is also why people misread tone so quickly. A message arrives with no facial expression, no vocal rhythm, no embodied context. Just words on a screen. The brain hates that incompleteness, so it fills the gap. It adds a tone. It imagines an intention. It decides whether the message is blunt, cold, passive-aggressive, affectionate, dismissive, rushed, angry, or harmless. The words may be simple, but the brain's prediction supplies the atmosphere. Someone texts, okay. One person reads it as neutral, another reads it as annoyed, another reads it as distant, another reads it as passive-aggressive. The stimulus is the same, but the prediction is different. The brain not only reads the word, it reads the word through relationship, state, memory, expectation, and the emotional history attached to similar moments. That is the predictive brain in action. It is not waiting for certainty. It is making a best guess and presenting that guess as perception. This becomes even clearer when we jump to conclusions. A person walks into a room and notices that two people go quiet. The brain may immediately predict that they were talking about them. A partner seems distant, and the brain predicts emotional withdrawal. A friend takes longer to reply, and the brain predicts rejection. A manager asks for a meeting, and the brain predicts criticism. A headline appears, and the brain predicts what kind of story it is before reading the details. A familiar political phrase appears, and the brain predicts the entire worldview behind it. Sometimes these predictions are accurate. That is why the brain keeps using them. It has learned from patterns. It has learned from experience. It has been learned that certain cues often lead to certain outcomes. But because prediction is designed for speed, it can become too confident too quickly. It can take partial data and complete the picture before the picture is ready. This is why the predictive brain is both brilliant and dangerous. It is brilliant because it gives continuity to life. It lets you walk without consciously calculating every movement. It lets you recognize a face before analyzing each feature. It lets you hear language as meaning rather than separate sounds. It lets you navigate familiar environments, anticipate danger, understand social rhythm, and act quickly when needed. Without prediction, the world would arrive too slowly and too chaotically. But it is dangerous because the same mechanism can trap you inside expectation. It can make the past appear in the present. It can make fear look like intuition. It can make old wounds feel like current evidence. It can make belief feel like perception. It can make the brain defend a model before reality has fully spoken. That is where the predictive loop becomes more than biology. It becomes the architecture of human patterning. Prediction begins with a model. That model may come from experience, repetition, trauma, culture, education, family, media, ideology, attachment, or identity. The model tells the brain what is likely. Then the brain looks for signals that fit. When it finds them, the model strengthens. When it does not find them, the brain may update. But if the model is emotionally loaded, it may ignore, minimize, or reinterpret contradictory information. This is how expectation loops form. A person expects rejection. Because they expect rejection, they notice distance more than warmth. They notice the delay more than the consistency. They notice ambiguity more than reassurance. When they notice those cues, the expectation feels confirmed. The expectation then becomes stronger, and the next situation is filtered through it even more quickly. Another person expects criticism. Because they expect criticism, they hear correction as an attack. They hear questions as interrogation. They hear disagreement as judgment. Their body prepares defensively, and the defensive response then affects the interaction. The other person may become frustrated, which then confirms the prediction. See, they were against me. The prediction begins shaping the reality it claims to detect. That is one of the most important things to understand. Prediction does not only interpret the world, it can participate in creating the conditions that later appear to confirm it. If you enter a conversation expecting hostility, your posture, tone, and defensiveness may invite tension. If you expect people to abandon you, you may test, withdraw, or cling in ways that strain the connection. If you expect failure, you may approach the task with fear, hesitation, and half-presence, making failure more likely. If you expect deception everywhere, trust becomes impossible, and every ambiguity becomes evidence. This does not mean the person is to blame for the original pattern. Many predictions are learned through real experience. A system that has been hurt predicts hurt for a reason. A system that has been manipulated predicts manipulation for a reason. A system that has been criticized predicts criticism for a reason. Prediction is often protection. But protection can become repetitive when the brain cannot tell the difference between a real present danger and a familiar past pattern. That is why awareness matters. The brain constantly anticipates incoming information. It prepares responses. It fills gaps before full data arrives. This happens so quickly that by the time conscious thought catches up, the emotional and bodily response may already be underway. You may already feel tense, defensive, irritated, ashamed, excited, suspicious, or certain. The body is already responding to the predicted meaning. That is why someone can say, "I knew what you were going to say," even when the other person had not said it yet. Sometimes that is accurate social intelligence. Sometimes it is a projection. Sometimes it is the brain finishing the sentence with old material. The key question is not whether prediction is happening. It is whether the prediction is flexible enough to be corrected. A healthy predictive system can update. It can be surprising. It can say, "I thought this was going one way, but now I see something else." It can revise the model when new information arrives. It can tolerate not knowing for long enough to receive more data. It can hold ambiguity without rushing to closure. A threatened predictive system becomes rigid. It treats uncertainty as danger. It prefers the familiar prediction, even if the prediction is painful. This is one of the strange things about the brain. Familiar pain can feel safer than an unfamiliar possibility. If the brain knows how to organize around rejection, then rejection feels terrible, but recognizable. If it knows how to organize around conflict, conflict feels distressing but patterned. If it knows how to organize around mistrust, mistrust gives the world a shape. Safety, openness, and uncertainty may actually feel more threatening at first, because the brain does not know how to predict them. This is why people sometimes defend limiting beliefs, not because they enjoy suffering, but because the belief provides a predictable map. People always leave. No one listens. The world is corrupt. I will fail. I cannot change. They are all the same. These beliefs may hurt, but they reduce uncertainty. They tell the brain what to expect. And a brain that is afraid of uncertainty may choose a painful prediction over an open question. The same pattern applies socially. Beliefs become predictive filters. Once a person believes a group is dangerous, foolish, evil, superior, oppressed, corrupt, enlightened, or beyond reason, the brain begins to predict what that group will do. It then interprets behavior through that prediction. Ambiguity disappears. Complexity collapses. The person does not meet the other side freshly. They meet the prediction of the other side. By the time thinking begins, perception has already been loaded. This is why public debates become so circular. People are not only exchanging arguments, they are defending predictive models of reality. One model predicts deception, another predicts oppression, another predicts moral decline, another predicts liberation, another predicts collapse, another predicts progress. Each model guides attention. Each model decides what counts as evidence. Each model makes certain facts visible and others irrelevant. So when someone encounters information that challenges their model, the brain does not necessarily respond with curiosity. It may respond with a threat, because a major update is not only informational, it can be emotional, relational, social, and bodily. It may require a person to reconsider who they trusted, what they defended, where they belonged, and how they made sense of themselves. That is why the brain often prefers confirmation over correction. Confirmation is easier. It keeps the model intact. It keeps identity stable. It keeps the body oriented. Correction requires energy. It requires humility. It requires nervous system capacity. It requires the ability to tolerate the discomfort of being wrong, incomplete, or unfinished. This is why the mechanism of prediction, sensory input, correction, and updated model sounds simple. But in human life, it is anything but simple. The update is not purely technical. It is not like a computer patch being installed without emotion. Updating a human model can mean grief. It can mean embarrassment. It can mean liberation. It can mean fear. It can mean losing certainty. It can mean seeing how much of your reality was built around an expectation you never examined. And yet, without update, the brain becomes trapped. It keeps predicting the same world and then finding it. It keeps entering new moments with old instructions. It keeps turning possibility into repetition. It keeps confusing the familiar with the true. This is why the core line matters so much. Your brain doesn't wait for reality. It tries to get there first. It tries to get there first because speed helps survival. It tries to get there first because uncertainty costs energy. It tries to get there first because past learning is useful. It tries to get there first because the organism needs a coherent world to act. But if it gets there too early, if it closes the meaning too quickly, it can mistake prediction for perception. This is where consciousness can intervene. Not by stopping prediction. That is not realistic. The brain will always predict. The practice is to notice prediction. To feel when the body has already moved into a future. To notice when you are responding to an imagined outcome. To notice when you are finishing someone's sentence before they have finished speaking. To notice when you are hearing a tone that may or may not be there. To notice when your reaction belongs not only to this moment, but to a pattern that arrived before it. This is especially important in relationships. The predictive brain can either protect a connection or sabotage it. If it predicts safety, it may allow openness. If it predicts an attack, it may create a defense. If it predicts rejection, it may withdraw before being rejected. If it predicts misunderstanding, it may over-explain, accuse, or collapse. If it predicts abandonment, it may cling or test. In each case, the prediction does not remain inside the head. It enters behavior. It enters tone. It enters posture. It enters the field between people. And once prediction enters behavior, it can shape the other person's response. This is how people become trapped in loops. One person expects criticism and becomes defensive. The other person feels pushed away and becomes sharper. The first person hears sharpness as proof of criticism. The prediction confirms itself. Neither person may fully see that the conflict began before the conflict. It began in expectation. The same happens with fear programming via anticipation. If a system is repeatedly exposed to messages that predict danger, betrayal, collapse, contamination, invasion, social humiliation, scarcity, or punishment, the body begins to live in advance of the feared event. It may never happen. It may not happen in the way predicted. But the nervous system has already paid part of the cost. It has already tightened. It has already narrowed. It has already reorganized attention. This is one of the hidden costs of modern media. It is not only what happens that affects people. It is what they are trained to expect. Constant anticipation of a crisis can keep the body mobilized. Constant prediction of threat can turn everyday reality into a field of warning signs. The brain begins to scan the present for the future it has been taught to fear. And once again, the question becomes, is this happening, or am I expecting it? That question is not designed to dismiss danger. It is designed to separate present information from predictive overlay. Sometimes the answer will be, yes, this is happening. The perception is grounded. The pattern is real. The prediction is useful. But sometimes the answer will be, no, I am living inside an expectation. My brain has arrived too early. My body is responding to a future that has not yet unfolded. That recognition creates freedom. It opens a space between prediction and behavior. It allows the brain to update instead of repeat. It gives the body permission to soften before the feared outcome is confirmed. It gives the mind permission to receive more information. It gives the relationship permission to become something other than the old pattern. This is why prediction is not only a brain function. It is a doorway into self-knowledge. What do you expect from people? What do you expect from yourself? What do you expect from the world? What outcomes does your body prepare for before life has spoken? What future are you already living in? What old model is still shaping new moments? These questions matter because prediction silently organizes experience. It decides what feels likely, what feels safe, what feels threatening, what feels possible, what feels pointless, what feels familiar, what feels true. And if prediction is unconscious, life can begin to feel predetermined. Not because it is predetermined in some absolute sense, but because the brain keeps selecting, interpreting, and behaving in ways that reinforce the same model. Awareness interrupts that. The predictive brain is not the enemy. It is part of your intelligence. It is part of how you survive, learn, communicate, and navigate complexity. But like any powerful system, it can run old code. It can act from outdated maps. It can confuse memory with reality. It can confuse fear with foresight. It can confuse expectation with truth. To understand the predictive brain is to become more careful with immediacy. To recognize that the first meaning may not be the final meaning. To recognize that the body may already be braced for a story that has not happened. To recognize that beliefs are not just ideas, but lenses that teach perception what to expect. So the anchor concept is this: the brain is not reactive. It is predictive. It anticipates incoming information, prepares responses, and fills in gaps before full data arrives. Perception is not input followed by interpretation. It is a prediction followed by confirmation or correction. And when you understand that, you begin to see something profound. You are not always reacting to reality. Sometimes you are reacting to your brain arriving there first. Part 3, the hidden layer of prediction, is that it does not usually feel like prediction. It feels like reality. You do not feel the guess, you feel the result. You do not experience the brain saying, I am estimating what this probably means based on past learning, current state, emotional memory, social context, and incomplete data. You experience a tone as threatening, a look as judgmental, a silence as rejection, a headline as proof, a person as unsafe, a group as wrong, or a situation as already heading in a certain direction. That is what makes prediction so persuasive. It arrives dressed as perception. The brain is constantly guessing ahead of the moment, but by the time the guess reaches conscious experience, it often appears as something already known. This is why people say, I just know. Sometimes that knowing may be grounded in subtle pattern recognition. Sometimes the body has detected something the conscious mind cannot yet articulate. But sometimes I just know is not knowledge. It is a prediction that is emotionally convincing. This matters because the brain's predictions are not always neutral. They are shaped by what the system has learned to expect. If the brain has learned that authority equals danger, it may predict threat around authority. If it has learned that intimacy leads to abandonment, it may predict abandonment within closeness. If it has learned that disagreement leads to humiliation, it may predict an attack in a conversation. If it has learned that certain symbols, phrases, accents, clothing, expressions, or group identities carry danger, it may respond to them before reflection has entered. The prediction is not felt as a hypothesis. It is felt as the world. That is why the first layer of awareness is so difficult. We are not trying to identify something obvious. We are trying to catch something that hides inside obviousness. Prediction does not usually appear as a thought bubble saying, "This is my expectation." It appears as an atmosphere, a feeling, a certainty, a bodily preparation, a narrowing of attention, a sudden readiness to defend, explain, withdraw, attack, comply, or prove. You may enter a conversation and feel your chest tighten before anything has gone wrong. The prediction has arrived. You may read a message and feel irritation before checking whether tone has actually been implied. The prediction has arrived. You may see a person's face and instantly believe you know what they think of you. The prediction has arrived. You may hear a news story and feel the conclusion before the evidence has been examined. The prediction has arrived. This is why prediction feels like reality. It is not only cognitive, it is bodily. The body prepares for the predicted meaning, and then that preparation becomes evidence for the meaning. If the body tightens, the brain may conclude there must be a threat. If the body becomes activated, the brain may conclude something is wrong. If the body feels relief at a certain explanation, the brain may conclude that the explanation is true. The system loops back on itself. This is where fast becomes confused with accurate. Speed gives confidence. The faster an interpretation arrives, the more obvious it can feel. A slow thought can feel uncertain because we are aware of the process. A fast perception feels direct because the process is hidden. This is why snap judgments can feel so powerful. They arrive with no visible signs of working out. They feel clean, immediate, instinctive, certain. But fast is not the same as accurate. Fast can mean well-trained. A doctor may recognize a pattern quickly because years of experience have shaped useful predictions. A musician may hear a wrong note instantly. An engineer may notice a fault that others miss. A parent may sense a child's change in mood before anyone else sees it. In these cases, fast prediction may reflect deep learning. But fast can also mean overlearned. It can mean trauma-based. It can mean fear-trained. It can mean prejudice. It can mean habit. It can mean the brain is using an old model too quickly because it has done so many times before. The speed is real, but the meaning may be wrong. This is where humility becomes necessary. The fact that something arrived quickly does not prove it arrived clearly. The fact that something felt obvious does not mean it was complete. The fact that the body reacted strongly does not mean the interpretation is accurate. It means the system has detected relevance. The meaning of that relevance still needs examination. A threatened nervous system especially tends to treat speed as truth. Under threat, the brain does not want long deliberation. It wants action. It wants to know, is this safe or unsafe? Can I trust this or not? Should I fight, flee, freeze, appease, prove, control, or withdraw? The faster the prediction arrives, the more protective it feels. But protective does not always mean precise. This is why many misunderstandings become self-reinforcing. The prediction arrives quickly. The body responds. The response changes the interaction. The changed interaction then appears to confirm the prediction. A person expects criticism, becomes defensive, and the other person becomes frustrated. The frustration then looks like criticism. A person expects rejection, withdraws emotionally, and the other person feels distance. The distance then looks like rejection. A person expects deception, interrogates aggressively, and the other person becomes guarded. The guardedness then looks like deception. The brain says, "See, I knew it. But did it know? Or did it help create the conditions it predicted?" This leads to the next hidden layer. The brain often prefers being right over being updated. This is not because the brain is morally stubborn. It is because updates cost energy. A stable model helps the organism move through life with coherence. If every prediction were easily abandoned, experience would become unstable. The brain needs continuity. It needs models. It needs assumptions. It needs ways of reducing uncertainty. So when incoming information contradicts an existing model, the brain does not always update immediately. Sometimes it resists. Sometimes it dismisses. Sometimes it explains away the contradiction. Sometimes it attacks the source. Sometimes it reframes the evidence so the old model can survive. Contradiction is not processed neutrally when the model is emotionally important. If a prediction is tied to safety, identity, belonging, morality, or self-image, contradiction can feel like a threat. A person who has built their identity around being rational may resist evidence that shows emotional bias. A person who has built their identity around being kind may resist evidence that they have caused harm. A person who has built their identity around being awake may resist evidence that they have been captured by another frame. A person who has built their worldview around mistrust may resist signs of genuine care, because trust would destabilize the entire model. The brain favors confirmation because confirmation preserves the map. And this is not only an individual. Groups do the same thing. A group prediction becomes a shared frame. The group expects corruption, so it notices corruption. It expects danger, so it finds danger. It expects betrayal, so it highlights betrayal. It expects stupidity from outsiders, so it collects examples. It expects moral superiority from insiders, so it excuses contradiction. Each new piece of information is filtered through the prediction, and the group becomes more certain with every cycle. This is one of the hidden engines behind narrative control. If you can install the prediction, the brain will do much of the confirming for you. Tell people what to expect, and they will often begin to notice the world through that expectation. Tell them danger is coming, and ambiguous signs become warnings. Tell them a group is malicious, and ordinary behavior becomes evidence. Tell them a leader is heroic, and contradictions become strategy. Tell them a system is benevolent, and harm becomes unfortunate complexity. Tell them everyone else is asleep, and disagreement becomes proof that the prediction was right. The brain would rather confirm a prediction than rebuild it. That sentence is uncomfortable, but important. Rebuilding a prediction means admitting that the old model may be incomplete. It means the system has to tolerate uncertainty while a new model forms. It means re-evaluating past conclusions. It may mean grieving the time spent defending something. It may mean losing belonging, certainty, status, or emotional safety. It may mean saying, I was wrong, or even harder, I was partly right, but not as right as I thought. Human beings often avoid that pain. Instead, the brain looks for confirmation. It selects data that fits. It explains away data that does not. It strengthens the frame. It turns contradiction into proof of the contradiction's own illegitimacy. If the evidence challenges the belief, the evidence must be biased. If a person challenges the group, the person must be corrupt. If the experience does not fit the identity, the experience must be denied, minimized, or rewritten. Again, this is not always conscious. Much of it happens beneath the surface. People often feel sincere while doing it. That is what makes it so powerful. The defense does not feel like defense. It feels like discernment. The bias does not feel like bias. It feels like clarity. The prediction does not feel like a prediction. It feels like reality. This is why awareness requires more than intelligence. Intelligence can be used to defend a prediction. A clever mind can build clever arguments around an old model. It can gather evidence, make connections, spot inconsistencies in opponents, and still never question the original expectation, organizing its own perception. Intelligence without self-observation can become a defense system. What matters is not only how well the mind can argue, it is whether the system can update. Can the brain be surprised? Can the body soften when new information appears? Can identity tolerate revision? Can certainty become flexible without collapsing into confusion? Can a person notice the difference between a prediction being confirmed and a prediction being protected? These are not small questions. They are central to consciousness. Because an unconscious predictive system does not simply interpret life. It repeats life. It uses old maps to navigate new terrain, then mistakes the familiar route for the only possible road. It expects what it has known, finds what it expects, and calls the pattern truth. This is how people become trapped inside relational loops, ideological loops, emotional loops, and self-concept loops. Someone who expects to be dismissed may repeatedly communicate from defense, then experience others pulling away. Someone who expects failure may hold back, then experience the result as proof of limitation. Someone who expects manipulation may treat every ambiguity as a danger, then live in a world where trust never has room to form. Someone who expects chaos may struggle to recognize peace, because peace does not match the nervous system's predictions. Prediction can become a cage when it cannot update. But the good news is that prediction can also become a doorway. Once you notice that your brain is predicting, you can begin to observe the prediction instead of becoming it. You can feel the first interpretation arrive and ask, is this a signal, or is this an old model? You can feel certainty and ask, is this clarity, or is this closure? You can notice speed and ask, is this accurate, or is this familiar? You can notice resistance and ask, what would have to change in me if this contradiction were true? That last question is powerful because it reveals why the brain may resist updating. Sometimes it is not resisting evidence. It is resisting the emotional consequence of evidence. If this is true, what do I have to feel? What do I have to admit? What do I have to release? What story do I have to loosen? What version of myself do I have to outgrow? This is why prediction is so bound to identity. We are not only predicting events, we are predicting ourselves. We predict how we will cope, how others will treat us, what we deserve, what is possible, what always happens, and what never changes. These predictions become emotional architecture. They shape the life we can imagine before we even move towards it. A person who predicts they are unworthy will perceive affection differently from someone who predicts they are lovable. A person who predicts the world is hostile will perceive uncertainty differently from someone who predicts the world contains both risk and possibility. A person who predicts their voice does not matter will perceive silence differently from someone who believes silence can be space rather than rejection. Same world, different predictive model, different perception, different behavior, different life pattern. This is why the hidden layer of prediction deserves so much attention. It is not just a theory of perception. It is a theory of how people keep recreating the worlds they expect. The brain predicts, the body prepares, perception confirms, behavior follows, reality responds, the prediction strengthens. Unless awareness interrupts the loop, that interruption does not have to be dramatic. Sometimes it is as simple as pausing before responding to a message, noticing the tone you added, waiting before assuming rejection, asking one more question before defending, letting a contradiction sit without immediately explaining it away, allowing someone to finish the sentence instead of reacting to where you thought it was going, revisiting a belief, not to abandon it, but to see whether it has become too rigid. These small moments matter because they train the brain that an update is survivable. They teach the nervous system that uncertainty is not always danger. They teach the mind that being wrong is not annihilation. They teach identity that revision can be a form of growth rather than humiliation. They teach perception that not every first meaning deserves to become the final truth. And this is where the episode's key insight returns. The brain would rather confirm a prediction than rebuild it. But consciousness can choose to rebuild. Not every time. Not perfectly. Not without discomfort. But increasingly, with practice, honesty, regulation, and humility, we can become more able to see where prediction has arrived before reality. We can learn to feel the difference between a living signal and an old conclusion. We can stop mistaking speed for accuracy, confidence for truth, and confirmation for clarity. Because the brain's first job is not to be philosophically precise. Its first job is to keep the organism oriented. Our work is to bring awareness to that orientation. To ask whether the world we are reacting to is truly here, or whether the brain has arrived too early and started calling its prediction reality. Part 4. Expansion Field. Expectation, fear, and the identity lock. Once we understand that the brain predicts before it perceives, we can begin to see how expectation quietly shapes reality from the inside out. Expectation is not just a thought about what might happen. It is a perceptual instruction. It tells the brain what to look for, what to prepare for, what to ignore, and what to treat as meaningful. What you expect shapes what you notice. What you notice then appears to confirm what you expected. And once that confirmation lands, the expectation grows stronger. That is the expectation loop. Expectation becomes perception. Perception becomes confirmation. Confirmation becomes a stronger expectation. This is one of the ways human beings become trapped inside repeated realities. A person expects to be criticized, so they notice tone, hesitation, silence, facial tension, or correction more sharply than anything else. Those details feel like evidence. The evidence confirms the expectation. The next time, the brain enters even earlier, already prepared for criticism before the conversation has unfolded. Eventually, the person may not feel they are expecting criticism at all. They may simply feel they are seeing people clearly. But the loop has already shaped the seeing. This is why expectation can become self-reinforcing. A person who expects rejection may become hypersensitive to distance. A delayed reply, a quiet mood, a distracted glance, or a slightly shorter message can all become evidence that rejection is happening. The brain fills the space between facts with predicted meaning. The person then responds to that prediction, withdrawing, testing, accusing, becoming cold, seeking reassurance, or bracing themselves emotionally. That response changes the relational field. The other person may feel pressured, confused, or defensive. Distance grows, and now the original prediction appears confirmed. The prediction helped produce the condition it feared. The same is true with conflict. If someone anticipates conflict before a conversation, the body prepares for defense. The voice tightens. The posture shifts. The opening words become guarded. The person may say they are only trying to be clear, but the nervous system is already speaking threat. The other person senses pressure and responds in kind. Tension escalates. Afterwards, both may say, "I knew this would happen." But the deeper question is, did they know it would happen, or did the anticipation help shape it? This is where fear programming becomes so powerful. Fear is often a prediction, not reality. It is the brain preparing for danger before danger has fully arrived. In genuine danger, this is adaptive. It gives the body speed. It helps the organism respond. But when fear is conditioned, repeated, socially amplified, or media-driven, the brain can begin to predict danger as a baseline. The future becomes emotionally active before anything has happened. This is why anxiety about a conversation can feel like the conversation has already gone badly. The body runs the future in advance. It imagines criticism, rejection, embarrassment, exposure, loss, punishment, or conflict. The heart responds. The stomach tightens, the mind rehearses. The nervous system pays the cost of a reality that has not occurred. Then, when the actual moment arrives, the person does not arrive fresh. They arrive already shaped by the predicted future. The same pattern exists in media and public narratives. If people are repeatedly told to anticipate collapse, threat, invasion, betrayal, humiliation, scarcity, disease, violence, or moral destruction, their nervous systems begin scanning the present for signs of those predicted futures. The fear does not need to be fully realized to affect behavior. The anticipation itself changes perception. People begin to notice evidence that matches the fear and dismiss evidence that complicates it. They prepare emotionally for the predicted world, and that preparation changes how they live inside the actual one. Fear narrows the future before the future has arrived, and when fear is tied to belief, the loop becomes even stronger. Beliefs are not just abstract ideas, they become predictive filters. A belief tells the brain what kind of world it is in. It says, this is what people are like, this is what always happens, this is what that group means, this is what authority does. This is what love becomes. This is what I deserve. This is what cannot be trusted. Once a belief becomes predictive, the process becomes belief, prediction, perception, or defense. The belief generates a prediction. The prediction shapes perception. The perception appears to support the belief. Then the person defends the belief because, from inside their experience, it feels proven. By the time thinking begins, the perception already supports the belief. That is why arguing with beliefs can be so difficult. You are often not arguing with an idea alone. You are arguing with a perceptual system that has already collected evidence in its own favor. A person who believes the world is hostile will notice hostility. A person who believes they are always misunderstood will notice misunderstanding. A person who believes every institution is corrupt will notice corruption and treat exceptions as deception. A person who believes one group is morally superior will interpret contradictions in that group more generously than contradictions in another. Again, this does not mean beliefs are always false. Some beliefs are based on real patterns. Some distrust is learned through genuine harm. Some expectations come from repeated evidence. But even when a belief begins in truth, it can harden into a filter that stops updating. That is when the belief no longer helps a person see. It begins to decide what can be seen. This is the identity lock. Predictions tied to identity become harder to change because they are no longer experienced as ideas. They become part of the self. If I see myself as someone who is always betrayed, then evidence of trust may feel confusing, suspicious, or temporary. If I see myself as someone who cannot be loved, then love may not land cleanly. If I see myself as someone who sees through everything, then correction may feel like an insult rather than an opportunity. If I see myself as belonging to a group that has the truth, then questioning the group can feel like losing myself. Identity makes prediction personal. Take the belief, people are untrustworthy. At first, this may come from real experience. Perhaps trust was broken. Perhaps openness was punished. Perhaps intimacy was unsafe. The brain learns, it predicts caution. Then, future behavior is interpreted through that prediction. A late reply becomes avoidance. A vague answer becomes deception. A boundary becomes rejection. A mistake becomes proof of character. The person may then protect themselves through distance, suspicion, testing, or emotional withholding. Others respond to that guardedness, and the relationship becomes strained. The strain confirms the belief. People are untrustworthy. The loop closes. But what is being confirmed? Reality itself, or the prediction's effect on reality? This is the hard part. Prediction can reveal patterns, but it can also preserve wounds. It can protect us from danger, but it can also keep us loyal to the past. It can help us recognize risk, but it can also make every new moment answer to an old injury. This is why awareness has to enter the loop before defense takes over. When a belief feels threatened, the brain often moves straight into protection. It argues. It explains. It searches for supporting examples. It dismisses contradiction. It tightens identity around the belief. But awareness asks a different question. What prediction is this belief generating? What is it making me expect? What does it make me notice? What does it make me ignore? What behavior does it produce in me? And does that behavior help create the reality I then claim to be detecting? That question is not comfortable, but it is liberating. Because once we see the loop, we are no longer trapped inside it in the same way. We may still feel the expectation. We may still feel the fear. We may still notice the old prediction arriving. But now there is a gap, a space where consciousness can ask, is this present reality, or is this prediction becoming perception? Expectation loops, fear programming, belief defense, and identity lock all operate through the same basic movement. The brain predicts. Perception organizes around the prediction. Confirmation strengthens the model. Identity protects it. And unless awareness interrupts the process, the person begins to live inside a world their brain has learned to expect. The invitation is not to have any expectations. That is impossible. The invitation is to hold expectation lightly enough that reality can still surprise you. Part 5, Real-World Field Case. The conversation that goes wrong. A simple example of prediction before perception is the conversation that goes wrong before it has truly begun. Imagine someone enters a conversation already expecting criticism. Maybe this expectation comes from experience. Maybe they grew up around corrections that felt like humiliation. Maybe previous relationships taught them that difficult conversations usually lead to blame. Maybe they are tired, stressed, ashamed, or already unsure of themselves. Whatever the reason, the body enters the conversation prepared. The other person may begin neutrally. Their tone may be calm. Their words may not be aggressive. They may simply say, "Can we talk about something?" But the predictive brain does not hear only the words. It hears the words through expectation. It hears history. It hears possible danger. It hears the beginning of an attack that has not yet happened. The body detects a threat. The chest tightens. The jaw sets. The stomach contracts. The breath becomes shallower. The brain starts preparing a defense before the other person has fully explained themselves. It predicts criticism, and once that prediction is active, perception begins to organize around it. A neutral tone starts to sound loaded. A pause feels like judgment. A question feels like an accusation. A facial expression becomes evidence. The person may not consciously think, "I am predicting criticism." They simply feel criticized, and because they feel criticized, they respond in defense. They might interrupt. They might over-explain. They might become cold. They might say, "Here we go again," or "You always do this," or "I know what you're going to say." They are not responding to the full conversation. They are responding to the predicted version of it. Now the other person reacts. They may feel misunderstood or attacked. Their tone sharpens. They become frustrated. They may say, "I wasn't even criticizing you, but now the atmosphere has changed." The first person to hear the sharper tone feels confirmed. The body says, "See, this was criticism. I was right to defend," and the loop closes. The original prediction has shaped the interaction it claimed to detect. This is one of the most painful patterns in relationships, because both people may feel sincere. One person feels they were only trying to raise something. The other feels they were being attacked. One says, "You got defensive for no reason." The other says, "You came at me." But underneath the argument is a deeper process. Prediction entered before perception had time to stay open. This is why the key line matters. You didn't react to what happened. You reacted to what you thought was about to happen. That does not mean the reaction came from nowhere. Often, it came from old learning. The nervous system had reasons, but those reasons may not belong fully to the present moment. They may be memories dressed as instinct. Old conversations echoing through new ones. Previous criticism is shaping the perception of the current tone. The way out is not to blame the person for predicting. Prediction is human. The way out is to notice the prediction before it becomes behavior. To pause and ask, am I hearing what is being said, or am I hearing what I expected? To say, I can feel myself bracing. Are you criticizing me, or am I interpreting it that way? That kind of sentence can change the whole field, because once the prediction is named, it loosens. The body no longer has to defend against a ghost as though it were the present. And sometimes, that small pause is the difference between repeating the old conversation and finally having a new one. Part 6, the cognitive shift. The cognitive shift in this episode is the movement from one assumption to another. The old frame says, I react to reality. The new frame says, I react to my brain's prediction of reality. That may sound like a small difference, but it changes the whole field. Because if I believe I am reacting to reality, then my reactions feel justified by default. My anger, fear, withdrawal, defensiveness, suspicion, or certainty all appear to be caused directly by what happened. The event becomes the explanation. The person becomes the problem. The situation becomes the proof. But if I understand that I am often reacting to my brain's prediction of reality, then the space opens. Now I have to ask what my system expected before it decided what was happening. I have to ask what my brain was already prepared to see. I have to ask what old model, bodily state, belief, or fear may have entered the moment before conscious thought arrived. This does not remove responsibility from the outside world. Real things happen. People do cause harm. Situations can be unsafe. Patterns can be genuine. The point is not to deny reality. The point is to recognize that the present moment is filtered through expectation before it becomes the reality we react to. That expectation may be accurate. It may also be outdated, exaggerated, inherited, socially reinforced, or built on old pain. This is why certainty becomes more complicated. Certainty may feel like proof, but sometimes certainty is prediction-based, not reality-based. It may come from the speed of recognition rather than the depth of examination. It may come from a familiar emotional pattern. It may come from the brain matching the present to the past and declaring the case closed. A person may feel certain they are being rejected, because rejection is what their system has learned to expect. Another may feel certain they are being controlled, because control is what their nervous system scans for. Another may feel certain they are being judged, because judgment has become the predicted meaning of attention. In each case, the certainty is real as an experience, but it may not yet be accurate as a reading of the present. This is the distinction that matters. A reaction can be sincere and still be built on prediction. A feeling can be real and still require interpretation. A perception can be powerful and still needs checking. The new question then becomes, is this happening, or am I expecting it? That question is not meant to invalidate instinct. It is meant to slow the automatic conversion of prediction into truth. Sometimes the answer will be, yes, this is happening. The pattern is real. The threat is present. The signal is accurate. The body has detected something important. But sometimes the answer will be, no, this is what I expected to happen, and now I am organizing the moment around that expectation. This question is especially useful in moments of emotional charge. When the body tightens, when the mind races, when certainty arrives quickly, when defensiveness rises, when a person feels the urge to prove, accuse, withdraw, or attack, that is often the moment to pause. Not forever, not to collapse into overthinking. Just long enough to ask whether the reaction belongs fully to now. Is this happening, or am I expecting it? Is this person actually criticizing me, or am I hearing criticism through an old filter? Is this silence actually rejection, or am I predicting abandonment? Is this disagreement actually disrespect, or am I expecting an attack? Is this uncertainty actually a danger, or is my nervous system uncomfortable without closure? Is this evidence, or is this confirmation of what I already believed? That kind of questioning does not make a person weak. It makes perception more honest. It gives reality a chance to reveal itself before the old model takes over. It gives the brain a chance to update instead of repeat. In relationships, this shift can prevent entire arguments. Instead of reacting to the prediction, we can name it. I can feel myself expecting criticism here. I notice I'm bracing for conflict. Part of me is reading this as rejection, but I want to check that before I respond. Those sentences are not soft in the weak sense. They are disciplined. They interrupt the loop before the loop becomes behavior. In media and culture, the same shift makes us harder to manipulate. A headline triggers fear, and we ask, is this happening, or am I being prepared to expect it? A group becomes outraged, and we ask, am I seeing the event, or am I seeing it through the group's predictive frame? A repeated narrative feels familiar, and we ask, is this true, or has repetition made it easier to believe? In the inner life, the shift may be even more powerful. Many people live inside predictions about themselves. I always ruin things. I never follow through. People leave. I cannot change. No one listens. I am too much. I am not enough. These statements can feel like identity, but often they are predictions built from previous pain. They organize attention and behavior. They tell the brain what to expect from the self and from the world. And then life begins to arrange itself around them. To ask, is this happening or am I expecting it, is to loosen the grip of those old internal forecasts. It is to create a gap between history and destiny. It is to say, my brain may be predicting this because it has happened before, but that does not mean this moment has to become the same pattern. That is the cognitive shift. We do not react only to reality. We react to prediction, expectation state, memory and meaning before reality has fully arrived. The present moment is not empty, it is preloaded. But once we can see the preload, we are no longer completely ruled by it. Awareness does not stop the predictive brain. It makes prediction visible. And once prediction becomes visible, we can hold it more lightly. We can let reality answer before we decide we already know. We can listen to the body without letting every sensation become a verdict. We can respect instinct without worshipping certainty. We can allow perception to update. That is where freedom begins. Not in pretending we have no predictions, but in learning to recognize them before they become the only reality we can see. Part 7. The somatic layer. The predictive brain not only thinks ahead, it moves the body ahead. This is why prediction is not just mental anticipation, it is physical preparation. The body begins to organize itself around what the brain expects is coming, sometimes before there is any clear evidence that the event will unfold that way. Your body lives in the future your brain is expecting. That sentence is central to this part of the episode because it shows why prediction has such power. The brain does not merely imagine possible outcomes as abstract thoughts. It prepares the organism for them. If the brain predicts criticism, the body may brace. If it predicts rejection, the body may contract. If it predicts conflict, the body may mobilize. If it predicts humiliation, the body may shrink. If it predicts danger, the body may narrow, tighten, scan, and prepare to defend. This is anticipatory tension. It is the body responding to a future that has not yet fully arrived. You may feel this before a difficult conversation. The conversation has not happened, but the stomach has already tightened, the chest has already become heavy, the breath has already changed, the shoulders may rise, the jaw may clench. The mind may rehearse arguments, explanations, apologies, defenses, or escape routes. The body is no longer in the present moment alone. It is participating in the predicted outcome. The same thing can happen before opening a message, attending a meeting, making a phone call, posting something online, seeing a certain person, checking financial information, watching the news, or approaching anything associated with uncertainty. Before the event happens, the nervous system starts preparing for what it expects the event to mean. This is preemptive stress. The system pays the cost before the reality arrives, and sometimes the reality never arrives. The conversation may not be hostile. The message may not be bad. The meeting may not be critical. The person may not reject you. The future may not unfold the way the body is prepared for. But the body still lived through part of it. It still tightened. It still flooded. It is still mobilized. It still burned energy. It still shaped perception. That is why anticipation can be exhausting. A person may look calm from the outside, yet internally they have already had 10 conversations, 3 arguments, 2 worst-case scenarios, and a collapse of the future before anything has happened. The body has been running simulations as if they were reality, and the more often this happens, the more the nervous system begins to treat anticipation itself as a normal state. This is where anxiety becomes predictive embodiment. Anxiety is often the body living in a future that the brain has not yet imagined, but has already emotionally entered. The system prepares for danger, embarrassment, loss, shame, rejection, failure, conflict, or uncertainty. The person may know intellectually that nothing has happened yet, but the body does not wait for intellectual certainty. It responds to predicted reality. This is why saying, "Don't worry," rarely helps. Worry is not just a thought problem, it is a state problem. The body has already begun organizing around expectation. To change that, the system often needs more than reassurance. It needs time, breath, context, safety, evidence, and the capacity to return from the predicted future into the present moment. This is also why emotional reactions can occur before events occur. A person may feel angry before a conversation begins because they already expect an attack. They may feel rejected before someone responds because they already expect distance. They may feel ashamed before speaking because they already expect judgment. They may feel grief before losing something because the brain has already imagined the loss. They may feel fear before a decision because the system has already predicted failure. The emotion is real, but its object may still be predicted. This distinction matters. If the emotion is real, it deserves attention. But if it belongs to a predicted reality, then it may not be an accurate guide to what is happening now. It may be a guide to what the system fears, remembers, expects, or has been trained to anticipate. This is where body awareness becomes essential. Without it, the person may be living inside prediction while believing they are responding to the present. The body tightens and the mind says, "This is dangerous." The body contracts and the mind says, "They are rejecting me." The body mobilizes and the mind says, "I need to defend myself." But the sequence may have begun with prediction, not fact. The threatened system tends to generate rigid, fear-based predictions. It does not like ambiguity. It does not trust uncertainty. It moves quickly to closure because closure feels safer than openness. If something is unclear, the threatened system often fills the gap with danger. If someone is quiet, it predicts rejection. If someone disagrees, it predicts an attack. If circumstances shift, it predicts loss of control. If new information arrives, it asks how this could threaten the existing model. This rigidity is not stupidity, it is protection. A threatened system has learned that being surprised may be costly. It wants to prepare early, so it is not caught off guard. But the cost of constant preparation is that the person may stop meeting life freshly. Every new moment is scanned through old anticipation. A regulated system is different. It still predicts, but its predictions are more flexible. It can hold uncertainty without collapsing into danger. It can notice a pause without immediately deciding it means rejection. It can hear disagreement without instantly preparing for attack. It can receive new information without treating every contradiction as a threat. It can allow reality to unfold for longer before the prediction becomes a conclusion. This does not mean a regulated system is naive. It does not mean ignoring risk. In fact, regulation often improves discernment because the system has more capacity. It can include more data. It can tolerate complexity. It can update. It can feel a signal without becoming possessed by it. A regulated system can say, I notice I am bracing, but I do not yet know what this means. A threatened system often says, I am bracing, danger is present. That difference is profound. It changes relationships. It changes decision-making. It changes how we respond to media. It changes how we hold uncertainty. It changes how we read tone, silence, delay, facial expression, disagreement, conflict, opportunity, and risk. The more regulated the system is, the more future predictions can remain provisional rather than absolute. This is why the body is such a crucial part of prediction. The brain may produce the expectation, but the body gives the expectation weight. Once the body is involved, prediction becomes harder to question. A thought alone can sometimes be examined, but a thought with tightness, heat, adrenaline, nausea, pressure, or collapse behind it feels more convincing. It feels embodied. It feels true. And sometimes it is pointing towards something important. The body may detect subtle cues. It may recognize inconsistency. It may sense pressure, threat, incongruence, or emotional danger before the conscious mind has language for it. But sometimes the body is detecting similarity to the past, rather than danger in the present. It is saying, this feels like before, and the brain translates that into, this is before happening again. That translation is where we need awareness. The body speaks in sensation, not always in an accurate narrative. It gives signals. The mind creates the story. A tight chest is a signal. They are attacking me is a story. A sinking stomach is a signal. I am being abandoned is a story. Heat in the body is a signal. I have been disrespected is a story. The signal may deserve respect, but the story deserves examination. This is not about distrusting the body. It is about learning the language more carefully. Because the body often tells us something has changed. It does not always tell us exactly what it means. That is where nervous system language becomes relevant to the wider field of this work. The body is always participating in meaning. It is not waiting for the conscious mind to produce neat sentences. It is responding to tone, timing, context, memory, rhythm, pressure, uncertainty, and predicted outcome. The nervous system is constantly asking, what is likely to happen next, and how should I prepare? When the predicted next moment is safe, the body may soften, widen, breathe, orient, and remain available. When the predicted next moment is dangerous, the body may tighten, brace, narrow, scan, and prepare for survival. That preparation then changes perception, which changes behavior, which may change the outcome. So the body is not simply reacting after the fact. It is helping create the conditions before the fact. This is why preemptive stress can become self-fulfilling. If I enter a conversation braced for attack, my tone may carry defense. If my tone carries defensiveness, the other person may feel accused. If they feel accused, they may respond sharply. If they respond sharply, my body confirms the prediction. The future I expected becomes the present I helped create. Not always, not completely, but often enough that it matters. This is also why healing and awareness require more than positive thinking. You cannot simply tell the brain to expect better if the body has learned to prepare for danger. The body must gradually learn that not every pause is rejection, not every disagreement is an attack, not every uncertainty is collapse, not every silence is punishment, not every new experience is a repetition of the old one. That learning happens through repeated experiences of prediction being softened and updated. Small pauses, safer conversations, regulated breathing, honest checking, clear boundaries, slower responses, more accurate language. The ability to say, my body is preparing for something. I need to find out whether that something is actually here. This is where the predictive loop can begin to change. The body prepares for predicted reality, but awareness can invite the body back into actual reality. It can ask the system to wait a little longer, to gather more information, to breathe before defending, to orient before concluding, to feel the signal without rushing to the story. And when that happens, perception begins to widen. A regulated system does not stop predicting. It predicts with more flexibility. A threatened system predicts with fear and rigidity. The work is not to eliminate prediction, but to loosen the grip of fear-based prediction so the present moment has room to arrive. Because the body lives in the future your brain is expecting. And the more conscious you become of that future, the less unconsciously it has to become your reality. Part 8. Observation practice today. Don't try to control your reactions. Notice what you expect before they happen. That is the practice. Choose one situation where you normally feel some kind of charge. It does not have to be dramatic. It might be opening a message, entering a conversation, checking comments online, watching a news clip, speaking to someone you often feel tense around, or beginning a task where you usually expect frustration, criticism, rejection, or failure. Before the situation begins, pause and ask, what am I already predicting? Not what do I know, what am I predicting? Am I expecting conflict? Am I expecting to be misunderstood? Am I expecting someone to dismiss me? Am I expecting bad news? Am I expecting manipulation? Am I expecting disappointment? Am I expecting myself to fail, freeze, over-explain, or defend? Then, as the situation unfolds, notice what you assume. Notice what your body prepares for. Do you brace before anyone has said anything? Do you start preparing your defense before the other person finishes speaking? Do you feel the urge to prove, correct, withdraw, attack, explain, or shut down? Does your system start responding to the predicted version of the moment rather than the actual moment? The question to hold is simple. What did I expect before this happened? I have noticed this in my own observations, especially when looking at emotionally loaded media, public narratives, or moments where people are clearly being primed to react before they have really examined what is being shown. Sometimes I can see how the frame arrives first. The headline, the tone, the image, the emotional bait, and the way the story is placed in front of people. And I have also noticed in myself that once I expect manipulation, I have to be careful not to let that expectation become its own filter. It may be based on real pattern recognition, but it still needs checking. Otherwise, I am no longer observing the moment clearly. I am observing through the expectation that manipulation is already present. That is the balance. The aim is not to distrust your instincts. The aim is to make your instincts conscious enough that they can be examined. Sometimes your prediction will be accurate. Sometimes you will notice a pattern before others do. Sometimes the body detects something meaningful. But sometimes the prediction belongs more to an old pattern, a previous experience, or a repeated narrative than to the present moment itself. So, after the situation, compare the prediction with the outcome. What did I expect? What actually happened? Did I add tone that was not there? Did I prepare for a conflict that never arrived? Did I see confirmation because I was already looking for it? Or did the outcome genuinely match the prediction? Do this gently. The point is not to shame yourself for predicting. Prediction is human. The point is to build a more honest relationship with the predictive brain. Because the moment you can see expectation before it becomes reaction, you create a gap. And in that gap, the present has a chance to be different from the past. So, as we bring episode 4 towards a close, the central point is this. The brain does not wait for reality to arrive before it begins preparing your experience of it. It predicts, it anticipates, it reaches forward into the possible future and begins organizing the present around what it expects. That is why some reactions feel older than the moment itself. That is why a conversation can feel dangerous before it has become dangerous. That is why a message can feel loaded before tone has been confirmed. That is why fear can begin shaping the body before the event has happened. The system is not only responding to life, it is preparing for the life it expects. And this is where the work becomes very practical. Because once you notice prediction, you begin to see how much of your inner life is not simply built from facts, but from forecasts. Some of those forecasts are useful, some are protective, some are intelligent, some are built from genuine experience, but some are outdated. Some are inherited, some are fear-based, some are identity-bound, some have been shaped through repetition, media, group belonging, trauma, and emotional reinforcement. And if they remain unconscious, they begin to feel like reality itself. This is why expectation loops are so powerful. What the brain expects shapes what it notices. What it notices appears to confirm what it expected. Confirmation strengthens the expectation. And soon, a person may no longer feel they are predicting anything. They may simply feel they are seeing clearly. But underneath that clarity may be an old model repeating itself. The person who expects rejection sees rejection faster. The person who expects criticism hears criticism faster. The person who expects manipulation detects motive faster. The person who expects danger scans for danger constantly. Sometimes the signal is real. Sometimes the prediction is accurate. Sometimes the pattern deserves attention. But sometimes the brain has arrived too early, filled the gap too quickly, and turned an expectation into a perceptual reality. This is the hidden tension inside prediction. It can protect us, but it can also imprison us. It can help us move quickly through complexity, but it can also make old patterns appear unavoidable. It can alert us to risk, but it can also make fear feel like wisdom. It can help us recognize repetition, but it can also stop us from noticing when something new is actually possible. That is why the question from this episode matters so much. Is this happening, or am I expecting it? That question is not there to dismiss instinct. It is there to bring awareness into instinct. It gives the brain and body a chance to slow down before prediction becomes behavior. It allows you to notice when you are bracing for a future that has not arrived. It lets you ask whether the present moment has actually spoken, or whether an old model has already answered on its behalf. Because very often, the body lives in the future the brain is expecting. It tightens before the conversation, it mobilizes before the conflict, it contracts before rejection, it prepares for criticism before a single word has been clarified. And then, because the body feels real, the prediction feels real too. The nervous system becomes evidence for the story the brain has already begun telling. That does not mean the body should be ignored. Far from it, the body gives information. The body often detects subtle cues before thought has caught up. But the body speaks in sensation, not always in final meaning. A tight chest may say, something matters. It does not always say, this person is attacking you. A sinking feeling may say, something has been activated. It does not always say, you are being abandoned. A rush of fear may say, the system is preparing. It does not always say, the future is certain. This is the difference between awareness and automatic reaction. Automatic reaction fuses sensation, prediction, and meaning into one immediate truth. Awareness separates them just enough to ask better questions. What is the signal? What is the story? What am I expecting? What evidence is here? What evidence is missing? What would I notice if I were not already braced? That kind of questioning is not overthinking. It is a form of perceptual responsibility. It is how we stop old predictions from colonizing new moments. And in a wider sense, this is also how we become harder to manipulate. Because if perception can be shaped through expectation, then any system that can train expectation can influence what people later believe they are seeing. If people are primed to expect danger, they will notice danger. If they are primed to expect betrayal, they will see betrayal. If they are primed to expect collapse, every sign becomes part of the collapse. If they are primed to expect salvation from a certain authority, contradictions may be ignored because the predicted meaning has already been installed. This is why prediction matters beyond personal psychology. It operates in media, politics, advertising, social movements, financial markets, public health messaging, relationship dynamics, family systems, education, and online culture. The future people are taught to expect begins shaping the present they believe they are perceiving. Fear programming works because anticipation changes state, and state changes perception. So the practical invitation here is not to stop predicting. You cannot. The brain predicts because prediction is part of its intelligence. But you can begin to notice what kind of future your system is already living in. You can notice whether your expectations are flexible or rigid. You can notice whether your predictions update when new information arrives, or whether they defend themselves against contradiction. You can notice whether you are responding to the actual moment, or to a pattern you have carried into it. A regulated system can predict and still update. A threatened system predicts, and then defends the prediction. That is the difference. Regulation does not make you naive. It gives you more room to test reality before reacting as though the outcome is already settled. It allows ambiguity to remain open for longer. It gives the present moment a chance to be more than the past repeating itself. And that may be one of the quietest forms of freedom. The freedom to not force the present into an old forecast. The freedom to let someone finish the sentence. The freedom to hear the tone before adding one. The freedom to ask the question before defending the answer. The freedom to notice fear without letting fear write the whole future. The freedom to allow reality to surprise you. Because prediction can become so fast, so familiar, and so embodied that it feels like fate. But it is not fate, it is a model. And models can update. This does not happen all at once. It happens through repeated moments of noticing, the pause before replying, the breath before assuming, the question before accusing, the willingness to say, part of me is expecting this to go badly, but I want to see what is actually here. The ability to name the prediction without becoming ashamed of it. The courage to let an old certainty soften. That is where fresh perception begins. Not perfect perception, not innocent perception, not perception free from history, but perception has enough space in it to receive something new, and this takes us directly into episode 5. If the brain is predicting reality before it arrives, then what happens when those predictions are built on simplified models? What happens when the brain reduces complexity into categories so it can move faster? What happens when we divide people, emotions, behaviors, intelligence, creativity, morality, and identity into neat opposites because the world is too complex to hold all at once? Because the next layer is not just prediction, it is how the brain simplifies the world to make predictions easier. In episode 5, we will explore the myth of the divided brain. Not only the popular idea of the logical left brain and creative right brain, but also the deeper human tendency to split reality into simplified categories, logical or emotional, rational or irrational, good or bad, safe or unsafe, us or them, awake or asleep, strong or weak, male or female, thinking or feeling. As we will see, simplification helps the brain navigate complexity, but it can also distort the richness of human experience. So episode 4 leaves us with a simple but powerful recognition. You are not just reacting to the present, you are living inside a predicted future, and the moment you begin to see that, you start to loosen the grip of expectation. You begin to notice where fear has arrived early. You begin to sense when certainty is really a forecast. You begin to feel where the body has prepared for a reality that may not yet exist. And slowly, the present begins to open again. You meet reality with something rare, fresh perception. So to close this episode, I leave you with this. Notice the future your body is already preparing for, and ask whether the present has truly arrived yet. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, you've been listening to If the Brain Was an App, the Expanded Interface, Episode 4, Prediction Before Perception. I'm James Miller.